Imagine a handwritten ledger containing 650 names. Beside each one, a method of torment carefully recorded. Welcome to the Teller of Tales, your channel of stories.
For centuries, the world has believed that a single woman turned her castle into a slaughterhouse in a desperate quest to preserve her beauty. But what if the most terrifying crime committed within those walls wasn't murder at all? Buried deep within royal archives lies a detailed history tried to erase. Something tied to a debt a king may never have intended to repay. The question is no longer just what she did, but what was done to her. Elizabeth Báthory. To the Guinness World Records, she is remembered as the most prolific female serial killer in history. To popular culture, a shadowed inspiration behind Count Dracula. But to modern historians, she remains something far more unsettling, an enigma obscured by the fog of political intrigue and manufactured legend. In the 17th century, to be the most powerful woman in Hungary was not a privilege. It was a provocation. Power attracted enemies. Wealth invited ambition. And for Elizabeth, the descent into darkness may have begun not with blood, but with silence. The silence left behind by a husband who never returned from war. The early life of Elizabeth Báthory was, by all accounts, highly unusual for a woman of her time. She was educated, fluent in multiple languages, and trained in mathematics, privileges reserved for the elite. Yet beneath this cultivated exterior, sources hint at something far more troubling: violent seizures and uncontrollable fits of rage. Some accounts attribute this to epilepsy, others to the consequences of a bloodline shaped by generations of consanguinity. Her marriage to Ferenc Nadasti, feared across Europe as the Black Knight of Hungary, marked a turning point. While he waged brutal campaigns against the Ottoman forces, Elizabeth remained behind, managing vast estates, and, according to testimony, enforcing discipline with chilling severity. Punishments for minor infractions were said to be extreme, even theatrical in their cruelty. One account describes a servant covered in honey and left under the sun, her suffering prolonged as insects gathered. But here, the narrative begins to fracture. If cruelty was a shared language within those walls, why did history remember only one name?
The most enduring image of Elizabeth Báthory is almost cinematic. A countess submerged in a bath of virgin blood, clinging to youth through unspeakable ritual. It is a powerful image, but one that collapses under scrutiny. By even the most basic calculations, such an act would have required dozens of victims at once, an implausibility rarely questioned. More telling, however, is the silence of the original testimonies. Among the hundreds of witnesses recorded during her trial, not one described such a ritual. The legend itself would not surface until nearly a century later, introduced by a Jesuit writer during a period when Europe had become enthralled with tales of vampirism and the supernatural. Contemporary records suggest something far less theatrical. Blood treated not as a sacred elixir, but as waste, left to be washed away. And if the most infamous detail of her legend was born long after her death, one must ask, how much of the case against her was shaped not by fact, but by fiction?
here, the record begins to fracture into something far more unsettling. By 1610, Elizabeth Báthory was a widow of immense wealth and influence. At the same time, Matthias II, Holy Roman Emperor, was burdened by a staggering debt owed to her, nearly 18,000 florins, a sum he could not easily repay. Around her, powerful relatives circled, their eyes fixed on her vast estates. What followed bore all the hallmarks of a political performance. Of the hundreds of testimonies collected, many came from individuals who had never set foot inside her castle, relying instead on rumor, fear, and hearsay. Those closest to her were subjected to brutal interrogation, their confessions shaped under the weight of torture. For the crown, the outcome was convenient. With Elizabeth silenced, a debt could vanish, and her lands could be divided. She was never granted a true defense. Instead, while her alleged accomplices faced execution, she was condemned to a far more chilling fate, sealed alive within the walls of her own castle, erased not only from power, but from the narrative itself.
Elizabeth Báthory died alone in 1614. When the guards finally entered her chambers, they found untouched meals and an unnatural, suffocating silence. To this day, the exact location of her burial remains unknown, lost somewhere between history and deliberate obscurity. Was she a sadistic killer who exploited her power without restraint? Or an independent aristocrat who became prey to forces far more dangerous than any legend suggests? The answer may lie hidden within the rumored ledger of 650 names. Names history transformed into myth, perhaps to conceal something even more unsettling. Because sometimes the greatest crime is not the one recorded, but the one erased. The systematic dismantling of a woman who may have held too much power in a world where such power could not be tolerated. So when you look upon her portrait, what do you see? A monster or a target? If you enjoyed uncovering the origins of this haunting literary classic, consider subscribing for more journeys into the shadows of history, literature, and the macabre. Until next time.